There's something about abandoned places that pulls at us. Empty houses, shuttered hospitals, forgotten towns. We're drawn to them because they're monuments to time itself, physical proof that nothing lasts forever. But of all the abandoned places in the world, there's one kind that hits different. Playgrounds. Because a playground is supposed to be a place of joy, of laughter, of life. It's where childhood happens. So when you find one that's been left to rot, where the swings hang still and the slides are covered in rust, it creates this jarring disconnect in your brain. The happiness that should be there is gone, and something else has moved in to fill the empty space. And sometimes that something else remembers the children who used to play there, and it wants them back. Tonight I want to tell you about a playground that should have been demolished years ago. A place where the local kids know better than to go after dark. Where parents tell their children to stay away, but they don't always explain why. This is the story of Riverside Park, and the thing that still plays there long after the sun goes down. Riverside Park sits on the eastern edge of a small town in Pennsylvania. The kind of town where everybody knows everybody, where the same families have lived for generations. The park itself was built in the early 70s, a community project funded by local businesses and the town council. It was beautiful back then. A sprawling green space along the Susquehanna River with a baseball diamond, picnic pavilions, and right in the center, a massive playground. The playground was the pride of the town. It had everything. A wooden fortress with rope bridges and spiral slides. A tire swing hung from an enormous oak tree. A merry-go-round that kids would spin until they were dizzy and laughing. A set of swings facing the river so you could watch the water while you flew through the air. For nearly 3 decades, Riverside Park was the beating heart of the town's childhood. Every kid had a memory there. First dates happened on those swings. Birthday parties were held at those picnic tables. It was a place of pure, uncomplicated happiness. And then, in the summer of 2003, everything changed. A 10-year-old girl named Emma Hartley went to the park one evening. It was a warm June night, the kind where the sun seems to take forever to set. Emma's mother had let her ride her bike to the park to meet some friends. It was only a few blocks from their house, and Emma had made the trip hundreds of times before. She was a careful kid, responsible, the kind of child parents don't worry about. Emma arrived at the park around 7:30. Her friends were already there playing on the swings. They spent about an hour together, laughing and playing, just being kids on a summer night. Then, around 8:30, as the light was starting to fail, Emma's friends left. The park was empty. Emma told them she was going to stay just a little longer. She wanted to swing by herself for a few more minutes, to watch the river as the sun went down. Her friends thought nothing of it. They waved goodbye and rode off on their bikes. That was the last time anyone saw Emma Hartley alive. When Emma didn't come home by 9, her mother called her friend's parents. When she learned that Emma had been alone at the park for over 30 minutes, she felt the first cold fingers of panic. She called her husband. The swings were moving slightly in the breeze, but there was no sign of their daughter. They called the police. Within an hour, the entire town was searching. Flashlights swept through the trees along the river. Volunteers walked the banks calling Emma's name. Divers were brought in to search the Susquehanna. For 3 days, the search continued. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, a fisherman found her. Emma's body was discovered a mile downstream, caught in the branches of a fallen tree. The autopsy revealed that she had drowned. But here's the thing that haunted the investigators, that still haunts the town to this day. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence that Emma had been forced into the water, and most disturbing of all, her lungs were full of river water, but her body showed signs that she had been alive and conscious for far longer than should have been possible. The medical examiner's report used careful clinical language, but the conclusion was impossible to escape. Emma had willingly walked into that river and kept walking, kept breathing in water, for what must have been an agonizingly long time. The town was destroyed. Emma's death was ruled an accidental drowning, but everyone knew something was deeply wrong. Happy, well-adjusted 10-year-old girls don't just walk into rivers. The park was closed immediately. The town council held emergency meetings. Parents demanded answers that no one could provide. And in the weeks that followed, as the shock began to fade and people started to talk, a pattern emerged. Because Emma Hartley was not the first. If you're enjoying these stories and you want to hear more accounts of the unexplained, make sure to subscribe to Whispers Beyond. We're building a community of people who aren't afraid to look into the darker corners of our world. Hit that subscribe button and join us. The town librarian, a woman named Margaret Cross, started digging through old newspaper archives. What she found was chilling. In 1987, a 7-year-old boy named Tommy Chen had disappeared from Riverside Park. He was found 2 days later in the river, drowned. In 1995, a 9-year-old girl named Sarah Winters had gone to the park alone one evening. She was found the next morning in the river, drowned. In both cases, the deaths were ruled accidental. Both children had been good swimmers. Both had shown no signs of distress in the days leading up to their deaths, and both had been alone at the playground in the evening, just as the sun was setting. 3 children, 3 deaths, all from the same park, all drowned in the Susquehanna under circumstances that made no sense. Margaret brought her findings to the police, to the town council, to anyone who would listen. But what could they do? The park was already closed. There was no evidence of foul play, no suspect, no motive, just a terrible, inexplicable pattern. The playground equipment was left to rot. The town simply couldn't bring itself to tear it down, but no one wanted to go back there either. It became a kind of memorial, a monument to the children who had died. And then, a few months after Emma's death, the reports started. The first came from a jogger who ran past the park early one morning. She reported hearing the sound of children laughing, the squeak of swings moving back and forth. She looked over at the playground and saw the swings moving, all of them, swaying in perfect unison even though there was no wind. She ran past without stopping, her heart pounding, telling herself it was nothing, just the morning breeze. But there was no breeze. The air was completely still. A week later, a man walking his dog at dusk heard a child's voice calling from the playground. "Hello? Is someone there? Will you play with me?" He peered through the rusty chain-link fence that had been put up around the park. The playground was empty, but the voice called again, closer this time, more insistent. "Play with me, please. I'm lonely." The man ran, dragging his terrified dog behind him. He refused to walk past the park ever again. The stories multiplied. A teenager on a dare climbed the fence late one night. He made it as far as the swings before he felt small, cold hands grab his ankles. He looked down and saw nothing, but the grip was real, firm, pulling him toward the river. He screamed and tore himself free, leaving bloody scratches on his legs where the invisible hands had held him. A construction worker doing repairs on the nearby bridge saw a little girl in a white dress sitting on the merry-go-round at midnight. She was spinning slowly, around and around, her face tilted up toward the moon. He blinked, and she was gone. The merry-go-round was still. The town tried to ignore it. People stopped talking about Riverside Park. The subject became taboo. Parents told their children to stay away, but they didn't explain why. They couldn't. How do you explain to a child that a playground is haunted? That something there remembers the children who died and wants more? But the children knew. Kids always know. They could feel it when they rode their bikes past the park. A cold spot in the air. A whisper on the wind. The sense of being watched by something that wanted them to come closer, to climb the fence, to come play. Most of the kids obeyed their instincts and stayed away. But not all of them. In 2011, 8 years after Emma's death, a group of high school students decided to investigate. They'd grown up with the stories, with the warnings, and like all teenagers, they thought they were invincible. They were going to prove that Riverside Park was just an abandoned playground, nothing more. They brought cameras, voice recorders, and flashlights. They climbed the fence at midnight on a Friday in October. The footage from that night still circulates online, and if you know where to look, you can find it. I've watched it, and I can tell you it's not something you forget. The video starts normal enough. 5 kids laughing, joking, calling each other cowards. They walk across the overgrown grass toward the playground. The equipment looms in the darkness, silhouettes against the night sky. The wooden fortress is rotting. The swings hang limp and rusted. Everything is still. And then, at the 4-minute mark, you hear it. A child's laughter, clear as a bell, coming from the direction of the merry-go-round. The laughter of a little girl, high and bright and wrong. One of the students, a boy named Jake, walks toward the sound. His friends are calling him back, but he doesn't respond. He's fixated on something the camera can't quite capture. He reaches the merry-go-round and stops. He's standing perfectly still, staring at something in the center of it. And then he speaks, and his voice is different. Softer. Younger. Like he's imitating a child. "I want to go to the river. The river is pretty at night." His friends are shouting now, telling him to stop, to come back. But Jake starts walking. Slowly, deliberately, toward the edge of the park, where the trees slope down to the Susquehanna. One of his friends, a girl named Ashley, runs after him and grabs his arm. Jake turns to look at her, and the camera catches his face. His eyes are completely glazed over. There's no recognition there, no awareness. He looks like he's sleepwalking. Ashley is screaming at him, shaking him, and then Jake blinks. The glaze clears from his eyes. He looks around, confused, terrified. Where am I? Why are we at the park? He has no memory of the last 5 minutes. No memory of walking toward the river. The group ran. They left their equipment, their backpacks, everything. They scrambled over the fence and didn't stop running until they were back in town. Jake refused to talk about that night. To this day, he won't discuss what he saw on the merry-go-round. But Ashley will. She's talked about it in online forums, in local news interviews, anywhere someone will listen. She says that in the split second before she grabbed Jake's arm, she saw what he was looking at. Standing in the center of the merry-go-round was a little girl. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face, river water dripping from her white dress. She was smiling, and she was holding out her hand to Jake, beckoning him to follow her to the water. The description matches Emma Hartley. The white dress, the dark hair. But Ashley says it wasn't just Emma. Standing behind her, she could see other children. A boy in a baseball uniform. Another girl with blonde pigtails. All of them dripping wet. All of them smiling. All of them reaching out. The town couldn't ignore it anymore. In 2012, a group of local clergy performed a blessing at the park. They prayed over the playground equipment, sprinkled holy water, asked for the souls of the lost children to find peace. For a while it seemed to work. The reports stopped. The park was quiet. But it didn't last. Within 6 months the activity returned. Stronger than before. The children were still there. Still playing. Still calling out to anyone who came near. And here's the part that I find most haunting. The part that keeps me up at night when I think about this story. The playground equipment at Riverside Park is still there. The town has tried 3 times to have it demolished. 3 separate construction crews have been hired to tear it down. And all 3 times something has stopped them. The first crew's equipment malfunctioned. Engines wouldn't start. Chains broke. After 2 days of failures, the foreman refused to continue. He said his men were hearing voices, children's voices, begging them not to destroy the playground. The second crew made it further. They actually managed to start tearing down the wooden fortress. But that night, every member of the crew reported the same nightmare. They dreamed of drowning, of being pulled under dark water, of children's hands holding them down. They quit the next morning. The third crew didn't even make it to the site. The driver of the demolition truck crashed on the way to the park. He survived, but he swears that he saw a little girl standing in the middle of the road. He swerved to avoid her and lost control. When he crawled out of the wreckage, the road was empty. After that, the town gave up. Riverside Park is still there, frozen in time, a monument to something no one fully understands. The theories are endless, of course. Some say the land is cursed, that something happened there long before the playground was built. Others believe the children's spirits are trapped, bound to the place where they spent their last happy moments. The most disturbing theory is that the children are still playing, that they're lonely, that they want other children to join them in their games, and they don't understand that the river is the only way to cross over. That they're calling out with love, with innocent need, never realizing they're luring the living to their deaths. I don't know which theory is true. Maybe none of them are. Maybe all of them are. What I do know is that Riverside Park is still there, and the children are still playing. If you ever find yourself driving through that small Pennsylvania town, you might see it. A rusted chain-link fence, overgrown grass, the skeletal remains of a playground silhouetted against the sky. And if you stop, if you stand there at dusk when the light is fading and the world is caught between day and night, you might hear it. The creak of swings moving in the wind, The laughter of children who should be gone. The small voice calling out from the darkness. Will you play with me? And once you join in, you're staying forever. There are so many more stories out there waiting to be told. I'll be here, waiting to share them with you. And here's my advice. If you hear that voice, if you feel those cold hands reaching for you, run. Don't look back, don't try to understand. Some invitations aren't meant to be accepted. Some games aren't meant to be played.